Hey everybody, it's Day here. We are doing another tier list for patch 5.7. A little bit late, but I think it's better late than never. I guess I got to see some gods get played in like ranked and stuff. By the way, qualifiers are literally the worst. But besides the point, let's get started. We've got Achilles. Achilles is a god that's been played and banned a lot. I think he's that guy. In ranked levels play, he's really good. I think that in SPL levels of play, he might not be as good. Like, people might not value him as much as, say, the Sobek, say, the Daji, those two different gods. Solo lane, Sobek, and Daji in the jungle. Achilles has been played in both. Iraffer likes to play him in the support role. Very interesting. I think he's the only one who's pulled it off successfully, though. I know Emilzy tried, failed. I think he was played once in mid. Don't remember how that went. I think he was played once in ADC. Don't know how that went. I think that in the Pro League, at least he was overrated by many. But I feel like he still brings the presence, especially the damage early game. And the aggression that you're able to bring with this character early game is nuts. It's actually one of the best in the game. His capability to execute allows him to transition decently well into late game, although his damage does fall off a bit, which is fine though, because he's got 5 executes if you get lucky. All in all, an S tier god in my opinion. Next up is Agni. I'm debating putting Agni in S-. I think he's really strong right now. Well, when you look at the mages, I think he's top 3 for sure. So I think, yeah, there is an argument for S- Agni, and I'm going to put him there. The curve of balance, people. He's been considered an A tier god for so long. I never understood that argument. I think that Agni always had the potential to be S tier, S-. I think people just have slept on his potential up until this point. He's got AoE burst damage, really easy to lock down AoE too. The meteors aren't that difficult to hit. His 2 is not that difficult either. His lane clear is pretty good with his passive on top of that. His cooldowns in general, I'm pretty sure, are relatively short. And I think what it comes down to is the fact that he brings a lot to a team fight. He brings the AoE, he brings the CC, the AoE CC. He also has the artillery effect where he's really safe because of his dash and his bombs reaching quite a far distance away. And he's also got the close range burst with his 2 and his 1 being able to just all around just CC opponents whenever he feels like it, because it can be attached to any of his abilities, meaning that he's one of the safest gods in the game right now, and also pumps out huge amounts of damage, especially since mages do a lot anyway. I think because of that, he's an S- god. Next is Amaterasu. Interesting hunter shift right now. People have been preferring the late game hunters, I would say. And Amaterasu is a hunter, so therefore he is late game. I'd say his early game isn't even that bad. The issue I have with this character is that ganking him is literally the easiest thing ever. Therefore, if you have say a jungler, like I don't know, let's just say Camazotz, right? You can level 2, just blink in, press 2 on him, press 1 on him, and he's basically dead. Because, he's Amaterasu, he has no dash, he has no leap, no CC immunity, really just nothing. And because of that, I think that he struggles a lot in this meta currently, because junglers, especially like dive junglers and junglers that just like have a lot of everything, are highly prioritized. I think that Amaterasu falls short of other hunters that are safer. I think he can still be picked depending on the comp, and also heavily relying on that upgraded sprint, which many supports are liking to pick up right now, or just regular sprint to keep him alive. But I really do feel the lack of mobility in the dual lane really hurts him. His bully potential is there though, so A- for him. Next up is Apwash. Bad god. Bad god. I don't think that Apwash is gonna be played ever. Should be played ever. Probably will just not see the light of day. I think that Apwash just has nothing that he brings that other characters don't bring, but better. If you want like a sustain-esque character that does burst damage, any other character that has healing, Ra has healing, Zhong Kui has healing, and Zhong Kui is that resilient-esque fighter that you kind of want in Apwash, except Apwash isn't resilient, so that's covered by Zhong, in my opinion. What other? sustain like hell, I guess. I don't know. Puch just really doesn't have a place in the meta, along with the fact that he is one of the least mobile gods in the game, and has no hard CC besides the, the heal block on his 3, and that requires a heal to be procced by an ability, so not even just like pots or whatnot. It has to be an ability, so really lacking in hard CC, as well as CC immunity, makes him a super easy target for any jungler to gank. Next up is Amaterasu. I think Amaterasu, surprisingly enough, is better in the support role than in the solo lane right now. I love her in the support role. I think she's super dope there. Surprisingly enough, I'm going to say that a couple of times with this character, she's got quite a good early game. Many people say that Ama's the late game carry, or the late game support solo laner that you would want because of her auras and her ultimate and her team fight. But her early game aggression, like her level 1 aggression, because of those auras, is pretty good. She gives 15 flat power with her level 1. So your hunter is hitting for 15 power harder than the opponents, which is basically just Hunter's Blessing, if I'm not mistaken. So that's really good. Plus, I think it's, 5% movement speed? That's basically T1 boots as well. So you are just going to be all the more mobile. Plus the passive, which is 10% damage increase on the opponents with 3 basics. That's a lot of early game. I think that Amaterasu in the support role is going to be really going to shine sooner or later. I think that a very underrated pick right now in the support role in particular, especially if you want that early game duo aggression while also having the team fight. Next up is Anhur. Anhur, he's got that aggression. I think that if you're an aggressive hunter player, you're going to look for the Anhurs. He's pretty safe with the ultimate being on a 75-second cooldown and granting him CC immunity. I think that's a big plus for him. It also helps him in boxing because, early to mid game, that ult's going to hit hard and it's going to start chunking people. The Pillar Impale, always going to be a tried and true combo in the hunter lane. Always got to be afraid of that because it does a lot of damage, especially early game. It's really about that early game aggression if you're picking Anhur, and I think because of that he's the A tier god, because late game compared to other hunters he kind of struggles a bit, not having an attack speed stim and stuff. But besides that, I think he's pretty good. Next up is Anubis. Anubis is better Puch in my opinion. I think that he's basically just a Puch with hard CC and CC immunity. However, he does have to stand still for his kit. Another issue with Puch, the biggest one I have, is that people are just building into anti-heal just cause. There is no need, especially in Europe, teams are just building anti-heal. Mages are building Divine Ruin, even if there is no healer on the enemy team. That's just simply because the stats on Divine Ruin aren't even that bad, and there's just natural healing in the game. So Anubis, you're going to get pretty heavily anti-healed, so your only form of survivability, which is lifesteal, is kind of going to get shut down. Therefore, you don't have too much survivability, and you would have to rely on killing the opponent before they kill you. Doesn't always work. Next up is Kuang. Kuang is a really interesting god. In ranked, I think he performs phenomenally. Without a super coordinated team, he just shreds through it. As soon as he gets one kill anywhere with the execute, he's going to start snowballing pretty hard in ranked. It's really hard to shut down an Kuang, especially if you're uncoordinated. However, in a coordinated team, I think he's a little less strong. I feel like teams will know that their beads are up or down, and teams will build Magi's Blessing to make sure that they can't get executed. I think the most important thing is that supports and carries just have communication with each other, and thus supports are able to easily peel, because Kuang has no CC immunity outside the ultimate, which he's going to use to try and get out. So there's that. He does also heavily rely on the blink initiation, otherwise he has no way of getting out the fight, and the only way he's able to weave in and out of the fight correctly is if he were to use his ultimate, which is not always guaranteed because of CC immunity and it being a 30% execute and you having to drop the opponent to that health threshold. Next up is Aphrodite. The day I'm recording this, which is the day Obey played against Dignitas, Xaylia looked pretty good on this character. However, I think she's still bad. Anti-healing exists, yeah, it exists. I don't know. I went through the spiel with Anubis, how people are building Divine just because of the stats, and not even, necessarily because of the healing reduction. Not to mention, I think that there's a few rising characters that really counter healers. Specifically, Sobek is one that comes to mind. His 3, it's like 40% anti-healing. Kokolin's always going to be a strong pick. I think that's 40% anti-healing as well. Cerberus just steals your healing, so that's even worse, because now you're not only are you getting less, but he's getting healing in return. And there's one more character that I'll touch on later, but all these characters in the solo lane are pretty strong, and they kind of shut down Afro quite hard. The thing about Afro is that if you were to play her in the mid lane, I think she'd get shut down even harder, because just like assassins will make sure she's behind pre-level 5, and an Afro from behind is really hard to get ahead because you're not really looking for all that much damage. You're looking to be a utility god, and I think the only role she can really be played in solo, but right now there's a lot of gods that kind of counter that, and then because of that I'll put her in A-. Next up is Apollo mid's making a resurgence. I guess it's not a resurgence. I don't think we've ever seen Apollo mid. Don't quote me on that. But Apollo is being played not in the ADC as much, but in the mid lane, which is interesting. I think he's played mainly into a Giannis to make sure he can match those rotations with his into the sky or across the sky. I mean, double hunter comps are kind of there. Like, they're not necessarily the most optimal, but if you have a Fafnir, double hunter comps do work. I think the thing with Apollo in particular is the fact that his boxing potential is so good with his passive, and because of that, he's able to just box out these mages early game while clearing, so there's that. In the ADC lane, he split pushes really well, and split push is kind of really annoying right now, because it's really hard to make rotations, because the map is bigger. That means someone, usually the solo laner, invests their teleport into making sure the split push doesn't happen, in which case you can just ult over to the team fight, so while the solo laner is not there, it's a 5v4 in your favor. I think that another thing is that late game hunters are being prioritized more, and Apollo is pretty late game. He gets his attack speed doubled from his passive, so that's always a plus when it comes to late game characters, and he just works really well with the crit build, similar to Rom. I think they have the same... similar, if not the same, base stats when it comes to basic attacks, and just all around a character that really revolves around basic attacks, besides his 1, because that's really his only form of damage. So crit being in the meta more, and Devos being in the meta more, just helps him out a bit. Next up is Arachne. Weekends played a lot of Arachne, and I think in ranked, Arachne is good, so now it's hard to argue against the Arachne pick. Besides, the fact that Midgardian Mail is kind of the most broken item in the game right now, in my opinion. Especially for tanks, at least. Midgardian Mail, if you do not know, just gives 10% movement speed and attack speed slow. Stacks up to 3 times. So, this is guaranteed now. It used to be a chance-based 30% chance or something like that. So, I think that hinders Arachne a bit, but she still does, unlike other basic attack-based assassins, she has the webs, which give her slow immunity. I think that's pretty important. So, although her DPS is going to be reduced by 30% because of, the attack speed debuff from Midgardian Mail, she still has the movement speed to keep up with you, so shouldn't matter too much. Besides that, I think Arachne's jungle clear and how much jungle farm there is for the character is nuts, and I think that's why people like the Arachne pick. I feel as though the ult is just like a good escape. It's a pretty good escape. Can be used for initiating. That's usually blink though. Her single target lockdown is really good, and that's why people pick her. Her team fight's really bad though, and that's why I only put her in A tier, along with Midgardian Mail existing. Next up is Ares. I think Ares in certain comps is really good. In other comps, Cerberus just does more. And in other comps, he's just flat out bad. I think that Ares is one of those gods where you have to know what you're doing with the character in order for the character to function. Kalos is a good example of a good Ares player. I think he plays the Ares quite well. He knows that early game you really want to just pressure out the opponents rather than clear wave, because Ares don't got that wave clear. But he does have a lot of pressure with shackles and how much damage they can provide. He also understands that, Ares ult is good setup, but not always for damage dealers, because they are the ones with beads. It's a really good beads burner, but it's also decent for pulling in like tanks early game because they're not going to be as tanky early game, so you can lock them down. I think that the main thing that Ares has right now is that big team fight ultimate and just pressure. But I feel as though the lack of early lane clear really hurts that ability to pressure, because it's hard to pressure a full minion wave. If you get what I'm saying, like, if there's a full minion wave on the enemy team, it's hard to pressure into that, because not only are you attacking a god, but the minions are also attacking you, and the gods are also attacking you, so, you know, all around, he's a decent counter pick, I'd say. I think that there are better gods in this current meta, but, you know, if you like him, I don't see a reason why you can't play him. Artemis. I think Artemis is making quite a bit of a rise, actually. I might even put her in the A+ tier because of that. Crit hunters are looking for a resurgence here, I think, Season 5, mid-Season 5. I think Artemis in particular, in comparison to, like, an AMC, really does feel safer, like, because especially once she hits level 5. Pre-level 5, it's a little riskier, but once she hits that level 5 mark, I think it's going to be really difficult to lock down this character. Her ultimate gives her CC immunity. It also stuns every opponent. The CC immunity lasts for quite a while, too. I think it's like 3 seconds or something. It's kind of stupid. Her crits, she just gets passive crits, so she can build really easily into any sort of crit build, which is being prioritized on hunters right now. Another thing that she has is just absurd amounts of CC compared to like AMC or something. She's got the ultimate. She's also got the soft CC on the slow in her 3. She also has the root on her 1, so she can combo that into her stun. I don't remember. I think it does not get affected by diminishing returns. Don't quote me on that. There are certain abilities that don't, and I'm pretty sure Artemis 1 is one of those. She also has movement speed in her 2, along with 75% attack speed, so she's got a lot that a hunter would want. The one thing she's lacking is early game clear, but that's what your support's there for. Am I right? Yes, I am. Next up is Artio. I think she's fallen quite a bit, especially in the solo lane, where people usually like playing her. I think that's just due to like bad matchups into like Sobek, into whom else? Cerberus, just the other Guardian solos. She just has a bad matchup into, and I think because of that, she's only an A+. She doesn't have a CC immune ult. She doesn't have an ult period basically. Her CC is really nice. I think her lockdown's really good. She's not the like top pick, top ban as like she used to be, but I think she still has her place in the meta, and she still is a really strong counter pick. Next up is Athena. Athena is pretty good, I think. I think that Athena provides a lot for her team. She's got the taunt, you know, global presence on the ultimate. I feel as though the biggest thing about Athena, though, right now, is that she's really good in those 3v3 fights where she can, like the mid laner, the jungler, and the support all, like, 3v3ing around. She's also really good in jungle fights, I think. I feel as though the dash taunt in the jungle can be really menacing, especially since there's really tight corridors and there's not many other places to run to. She also is a flex pick into, like, multiple roles, so she's got that going for her. The only thing that's bringing her down, in my opinion, is that her level 1 is not the greatest. Like, compared to other Guardians, her level 1's mediocre. She doesn't have CC. Her clear is a little wonky as it doesn't hit the full wave. And it takes a long time for her damage to go off, so if you want to bully people out, you're going to have to hope that they sit in the shield wall for 2 ticks. So, I mean, besides that weakness, that one small weakness, she's a really strong character, and people show up on her. Next up is Awilix. Awilix is interesting. She's a really good counter pick into certain characters that exist. Like, I mean, I'm not going to say characters, because a vast majority of these characters are viable. I think that she's a good counter pick into many leap-based gods, which isn't, you know, shocking, I know. But she is that counter pick. However, picking her, like, prematurely, I think, is a really bad idea to do. She also kind of sort of needs a team to synergize around her, so like, you might want to have like at least a support with a knockup, if nothing else. But I think that she does have the synergies. Her ultimate is always going to be pretty good. The pluck, you know, just pulling someone into a fight. I think with Sobek, since Sobek is so popular, I feel like Awilix might see a rise, just purely because Sobek pluck into Awilix ult is pretty tried and true combo, because it's always going to be one person and she can basically guarantee the pluck because they fly so high. Her early game burst is just super powerful. Late game she does fall off a bit, like most assassins though. We'll see though. I think Awilix is a little bit underrated right now, but especially because Sobek is such a popular pick. But there are better picks in the jungle right now, I do admit. Next is Bacchus. I don't think he's been played at all, really, by anyone, like SPL to ranked. I don't think I've seen him much. Bacchus is interesting. I say this because, like, he does have that initiation with his 2, his belly flop. And he has the damage with, like, his abilities, and he has, like, CC and stuff. I think that right now, Kumba, which is really weird to say, does what he's trying to do better. It's kind of weird, right? Like, the damagey, like, all up in your face, sort of like, run at you, Guardian. Kumba and Ares do that a little bit better right now. I think, in particular, with the amount of lockdown Bacchus has, I think Kumba's doing that better right now. So there's no reason to pick him there. When it comes to lane clear, he's got one of the worst. I think Ares might be the only one with worse lane clear than him. Yeah. He's all about that aggression, though, so we might see more Bacchus. I feel like I said, I've said this for a lot of gods, but I think he might be a little underrated by people. But at the same time, there's a lot of interrupts right now, so getting that belch off easily is pretty difficult. Next is Bakasura. Remember when this character existed? Yeah, it was a good up to 5.6, I believe, when Midgardian Male was changed. That's when Bakasura fell to the Basura and is going to stay there. B tier for the B god, because boy oh boy did Midgardian Male screw this character over. Because not only does Midgardian Male give health, the hardest counter to true damage. Not only does Midgardian Male give physical protections, hardest counter to physical damage. Not only does Midgardian Male give an attack speed slow, hardest counter to basic attack based gods who rely on attack speed, Bakasura, it also slows movement speed, which is very important for hasten based gods like Bakasura. Literally, Midgardian Male alone makes this character from anywhere above this tier, this tier. There is no reason to ever pick this character. Not only that, the issue is, if you, characters like Kali and Arachne at least can change their target. They don't have to go for the tank. Kali and Bacchus, sure, they're like tank shredders. That's what their goal is. They don't have to go for those, though. Arachne and Kali don't. Bakasura kind of does. I'll explain this, because his ultimate gives him a cone basic attack. So, not only are you going to hit the carries, but since it's AoE, this usually sometimes somehow does more harm than good for him. If not even like has to see, the Guardian doesn't even have to CC. If the Guardian just stands next to his or her carry, they've basically reduced your damage by 30% at that point. And then they can start CCing you because you're slowed, basically. And then you get locked down, and since you've used your ult and you have no CC immunity, you die. Baka is definitely really reliant on the team either A, not being smart enough to be building Midgardian Male and or Horrific Emblem and or Sprint, you know, or B, heavily relies on his team being able to provide him with the movement speed, provide him with the attack speed to maintain damage despite having to go into Midgardian Male. I feel like Baka's going to really fall until Midgardian Male is nerfed, which hopefully it eventually does get a nerf. Next is Bastet. Bastet is... I like Bastet. I think she's good. I might be the only one here that thinks that, but I think she's good. Early game is super solid. People say she falls off late game. She's got like 100% scaling abilities. I don't think she really falls off. Her role just changes. I mean, you can say that about every god, I guess. But her role, like, her damage doesn't really fall off, in my opinion. I think what happens is that she becomes more poke heavy than burst heavy. So she, like, leaps in, drops her kit, leaps out. And usually early game, that would just kill a person. Late game, that won't kill a person, but it'll make them too low to fight. And from there, your team can easily, like, win the engagement. Her biggest lacking is the lack of hard CC. She has a lot of slows. Currently get hard countered by upgraded sprint, which is why she isn't higher on the tier list, by the way, because upgraded sprint is really... I love that item. I think it's stupid broken.
I don't know why it's allowed to exist, but I pick it up on supports all the time. It's really good into Bastet because, you know, her only form of lockdown is a slow. And once you shut that down, she has really no chase or kill potential outside of that. If she applies to her tick, though, she's able to maybe secure a kill. I think that Bastet is really just good because of the damage. You're really picking her because of the damage and the pressure she provides early game more than anything else. Next is Bellona. Bellona is a character in the solo laner that does Bellona. Like, I don't know. It's hard to not like Bellona, but it's also hard to say she's like one of the best right now. I think that she does provide a lot, like a good amount of damage, a good amount of healing with her 3, a good amount of resilience with her 1, 3, and ult, a good amount of CC with her ult and 1 and 3. You know, she's got a good amount of everything. I think because she's a jack of all trades solo laner, she kind of does lack in certain departments that other characters might bring more of, like for example Sobek, Peel, and CC in general, lockdown, lockout kind of deal. Cerberus' aggression and anti-heal and stuff. Like, because she's a jack of all trades, she doesn't have things she excels at, and certain things that excel in a meta do more. So I think that might bring her down a bit, and that's why I only put her in A+ and not anything higher. Next is Cabrakan. I haven't seen much of this dude, which is unfortunate. This green man, he's trying his darndest, man. I don't know where to put him. Support doesn't work. I don't think jungle works. I don't know if solo works. But one thing I will say in a positive of Cabrakan is he's very good at locking down low mobility characters. Take for example like an Amazon Cup. I mean, if he was ever fighting an Amazon Cup for some reason, that Amazon Cup should lose basically every matchup until late game. Because what Cabrakan says in jungle would do is he would blink 1, 2, 3, or blink 1, ult, 2, 3, and you're dead. Because you can't walk around the wall because you're getting tremored, and you can't fight him because he's Cabrakan early game, and you're only Amazon Cup early game. So you should lose that fight most times. And I think that Cabrakan, because of that, has potential to be a very good pick into low mobility characters. Specifically certain mages that like to be played currently. I'm thinking mainly Hou. I think that Cabrakan actually has a nice matchup into Hou. Thoth, he has a decent matchup. I still think that Thoth is really strong, a little bit too strong. Giannis, alright matchup. I think Ra is one of those gods that is kind of being looked at more, that he has a good matchup into. Agni, bad matchup. I don't like that matchup. Discordia, she's got the leap. Unfortunate for him. But other than the really mobile mages, like the ones that don't have like a really obvious leap or dash, I think that Cabrakan really rustles their jimmies, if you know what I'm saying. Next is Camazotz. He took a nerf this patch. Don't think it'll drop him though too much. He still got the burst. I don't think they nerfed his damage at all. They only nerfed his healing, so his potential as a solo laner drops a bit, but I don't think it drops enough for him to be bad or considered average in solo. He's still a good flex pick, which is really valuable. I mean, being able to flex pick characters is always good because it keeps your opponents on their toes and makes them always question what you're actually going. Another good thing is he's still like a beast in jungle. His ult does a lot of damage. It's free damage too because you can't touch him while he's in it. He's got heals, so jungle sustain and just early pressure through those heals is really prevalent. His 3 is also stupid in the fact that you can heal up to like infinite, bro. Like if there's infinite enemies on the screen, you can heal up off of all of them, which is really dumb. I think if they wanted to nerf it, they would probably put a cap on it, and I think that's the only nerf you would really need to a sustain, but they chose to go the other routes, which was I think like, I don't even know what I think it was like 5% off vampirism, something like that. I think flat sustain off his 2 was reduced, and I think the scaling of his 3 was reduced, something like that. But his sustain being reduced doesn't reduce his damage at all, so his assassin potential is still there. Cerberus is another one of those gods where it's just like, you know, I don't know why he exists in this current state, but he does, so why not? Cerberus, really good in solo, really good in support,
Brings aggression in both roles, brings damage in both roles, brings CC in both roles. Utility also with the protection shred. Sustain, I mean, that's not as big of a deal, but anti-healing as well. What does Cerberus not have? Let's think. Let's brainstorm together. Physical damage, he doesn't have that. Basic attack damage, I guess he didn't have that either. Besides, like, what physicals are supposed to do, he has got most of it all. His 1 hits for way too hard. His 2 does a lot still, like the slow, the protection shred, the damage, you know, all of that, plus activating your 1 to do more damage, you know, that's pretty good. His Stingy and Torment can always, if it's done well, if he catches multiple people with it, can literally swing a fight in your favor. His 3, good leap now. It's actually really long range, surprisingly. So good initiation, as well as escape. It also has a heal attached to it. If you hit something and you basic it down, I don't think that's like anything good. I think that heal is a little mediocre. Because of the fact that, you know, you got to kill the souls in order to get the heal. But besides that, one of the better gods in the game. One of the best guardians in the game, in my opinion. Kronos. Kronos is a late game hunter. And he does have multiple build paths. I think he's an A+ god. That ultimate really impactful in team fights. And since late game hunters are being prioritized heavily right now, I think that Kronos is one of those. And because of that, I'll say he's good. I think he's pretty good. His early game is a little lackluster though. I think that his second ability doesn't clear that well into like level 7-ish. That's about when it starts getting online, but once you get to that point, I think Kronos is a pretty good hunter. He used to be one of the best, now he's considered pretty average. I don't know. It's pretty cool. Chalk is a character that exists. Midgardian male does what he does with his 3, but worse. Chalk has his place against these double hunter comps now, I think. If teams really like running that, I think that Chalk really has potential to fight into that. The issue with the Chalk pick, though, is that it hurts whenever you build Thorns. Like, if you build Thorns on Chalk, it's not beneficial because, you know, you're not really going to get to proc as much crit damage back to the hunters because, you know, you're slowing their attack speed. But at the same time, you're reducing their DPS, so how can you really be mad? There's always going to be that issue with Chalk where he doesn't do much late game compared to early game. Early game, he's got the damage, he's got the pressure, he's got the clear, he's got everything. Late game, he kind of has the healing, he's kind of tanky, he's got the ultimate, but that's about it. And many people just prefer like a Guardian solo instead because of that. I'm not sure how I feel about Chalk. I know certain people, Cough D and Brandon Cough think he's a monster. I don't see it like that. But I think that he has potential to grow. We'll see where it goes from here. Next up is Chang'e. Similar problems to many of the healers in this game. Not only does she lack like a proper place to be played, like I don't know if people play her in jungle, mid, solo, or support right now. Probably none of them because you just want to have a better god in each of those roles. Also, healing is very interesting because Divine Rune's being picked up so often, so frequently, it's really hard to get high healing numbers with certain characters, especially Chang'e, who has a mediocre heal in my opinion, not the best. But she does have anti-heal, so into healing comps, I feel like she does well. Her ultimate's always going to be strong. It's a 1-second stun plus 1 second per person you hit, so it could be up to, what, 6-second stun if you hit all 5 people. That's really strong, really powerful. Excuse me. Besides that, her 1's on an extremely low cooldown. She's got damage immunity in her 2. She's got a good kit. I think that certain mages, like depending on where you're playing her, certain characters just do more in that role than she does. And because of that, she hasn't played as much. Chiron. I know Chiron is a very specific counter pick into dodgy. And that makes him pretty interesting. However, he also is just, you know, Chiron, so he doesn't have as much as most other hunters have. His late game isn't all that. Something that many players like right now. Late game hunters being pretty heavily prioritized, really. Kind of surprised by that. But what's really good about Chiron is the cleanse, and I think that's what's a talking point. If he's going to rise in any sort of like competitive play, any sort of like ranked SPL play, it's because of that cleanse and his capability of countering characters like the Dodgy, which has been really highly valued for most of this season. Being able to counter those sort of picks, I think, will really make or break your spot in the tier list. And I think for Chiron, it's made him quite nicely in the A tier, specifically because he's only a counter pick. But we could see him rise in the next couple patches, depending on what becomes more prevalent and less prevalent. The only issue is being a counter pick based character. You could drop really hard on a tier list like Fenrir when Rat stopped being good. Because Fenrir was mainly there to deal with Rat, and when Rat stopped being good, Fenrir kind of fell down with him. Right now, it's looking to be that Dodgy is kind of dropping, so I don't think Chiron's going to be any higher than A for now. Kronos is the next god. I'd say he's an A tier god. He's always going to be that late game monster. Early game, however, really rough for this character. Not that great, I'm not going to lie. His early game is kind of poo-poo. He's got the poke, though, with his 1 being on a 5-second cooldown. His basic attack damage is always going to be high. He's a pretty good hyper carry, and if you rewind correctly, you can just turn a team fight because now you're full health and they invested a lot into you. But if you get bursted while rewinding, that's gonna suck a lot. And it's pretty prevalent now that Mage Burst is really strong, and crits are also a thing. I don't know, Kronos might have some trouble in the meta, but he's also very strong late game, so it'll be interesting to see how this character grows as the season develops. Not gonna lie. Go Colin! One of the better picks in solo right now, in my opinion. He has 2 kits, so that alone makes him really strong. But he also has a lot of CC in his beast form, and he has a knock-up in his normal form, so he can even be played in support, and people like him in support. Interesting enough. I personally do not. I don't like playing the character, though, so that's probably why. I also just don't like most warrior supports. I think Ama support and Erlang support are the 2 warrior supports I am willing to play. Cucullin, Achilles, not my cup of tea. I'm not that aggressive. I like the CC heavy gods. But Cucullin, as a soul laner, has a lot. His bully potential is just through the roof, specifically just because, you know, of his passive and his ability to just transform and have a whole nother kit just designated to do damage and just to make you frustrated. I think that's the main deal with Cucullin, is that he's really just a bully, especially in lane. In late game team fights, he does less than, say, Amaterasu or like a Sobek, but it's harder to get to that late game when you're getting bullied all through laning phase, and I think that's why he's an S- god. Cupid! Worst stability-based hunter in the game right now, maybe? That ultimate, it's decent, like I said before, but I'm going to mention it a couple times now. Upgraded sprint is being picked up a lot right now, and because of that, I think that Cupid's play is not going to be there. You can easily just pop the sprint out of his ult, and it also stops the slow from happening on his 2, so you can get quite a bit of distance before he even stuns you. Not to mention the fact that he only really has 2 damaging abilities, 1 outside of his ultimate. So, as an ability-based hunter, he doesn't even have that many abilities. As a basic attack hunter, he doesn't have anything to augment his basic attacks to make them better. So, in reality, he's kind of this weird limbo where he's worse at both than every other character in the game. Quite interesting when you look at it. But I think that, real talk, I think Cupid's biggest issue is the lane clear. I think once he figures that out, I think that he becomes a better god. Because his ult in a team fight is still going to hurt. Next is Dodgy. I can't really say if this character is dropped all that much from the nerfs. She's definitely prioritized less. I'd say that for sure. Out of the 3 junglers that people are looking at now, I think she's second or third best. It's either her or Nem who's second best. Right now, Dodgy still has the CC in the ultimate, still has the damage in the 1 and the 2 and the 3. She just has less of it, especially with the Crusher nerf. We might see a lot less Dodgy, and I might be overrating her right now. but I still think that her burst damage is up there, and because of that, I think she is up there, you know? It's Dashi. She's an assassin. She's gonna burst. Next is Discordia. Discordia, where should I put you? I'm tempted to put her in S-. I think she's the 4th best mage in the game currently. The control she provides is absurd with the 2. The strife is really devastating if you hit like more than 2 people in a team. If you hit like 3 people in a team fight, that team fight is probably over. Golden Apple of Discord, always just a pretty strong ability. Can secure objectives, relatively slow, but the projectile does do a lot of damage on impact and does even more damage upon exploding and can spread to multiple targets. Not only that, but it also cripples and intoxicates opponents. So she's got a lot of control in 2 abilities, and she can also reset the cooldown of her 1 and a 2 using her 3. And the 3 is where I'm going to touch on her biggest weakness, which is safety. Unlike the Agni, unlike the Thoth, unlike the Giannis, some of the higher end mages currently, she is not safe. Her leap kind of, you know, it's pretty small. We'll just say that. It'll get you from point A to point B, except if point A was this point and point B was here. Now, she'd be able to move this far about. I think that because of that, she really is hindered a lot. At least she does have an escape, though. That gives her invisibility, which is quite nice. But I think that a lack of a long-ranged, like, separation tool really is going to hurt her. Erlang Shen, I think he's underrated in support, but at the same time, Midgardian Male exists, and because he's basic type based, he gets hurt a lot by that item. He's got a lot of CC, just doesn't have a place in the meta right now, especially with Midgardian Male. And just like Warrior's Blessing being really good against really chip-heavy gods, like gods that want to chip you away. Erlang is one of those because of his passive and his basic attacks. I think in support, he might have a rising again. I like him in support. I play him in support. And I think it's super good. But we shall see. We shall see. I'll just put him in A tier for now. Fafnir. Fafnir is seeing a bit of a rise here, I think. I think that Fafnir is one of the better Guardians. I might even put him in S-. Who else would be there? Sobek would. Yeah. We'll put him in A+ for now. I might change him in the future. But for now, A+ because double Hunter kind of coming back. And Fafnir is really good with double Hunter. Specifically Hachiman, Fafnir, and mid lane Hunter of your choice. Usually Uller or something like an Apollo. Sometimes Hou Yi. You know, the ability-based Hunter. Fafnir, just having that second ability course, man, does a lot of offensive damage. The thing with Fafnir is, and the reason I don't put him in S-, is that he's a little lackluster in the peel department, if you ask me. He's very aggressive. He's very aggression-focused. And sometimes that's a good thing, like when it comes to objectives and like just securing things. But sometimes it's a bad thing when it comes to peel in particular. Certain gods just... Like, Fafnir requires a lot of skill in order to peel effectively with the hammer. If you don't land that hammer, that's your only peel ability. And that's where things get troublesome. Besides that, like, that's pretty big flaw. But besides that flaw, he's one of the better Guardians, specifically because of the chorus. And the ability to control and siege objectives with ease. Fenrir. Since all the higher end junglers are kind of falling a bit, Fenrir is slowly climbing up the ladder. He's got the CC in the leap. He's got the reset in the leap. Specifically the cooldown reset. And he's got the damage in his brutalize as well as the CC in the ultimate. I think that Fenrir's solo might be something we see a lot more of because of the bully potential that his 1 has. And his ability to just abuse characters without beads. AKA usually the solo laner. I think that Fenrir really will be a solo lane pick more than a jungle pick, in fact. And I feel that the pressure that he provides in both roles, though, cannot be ignored. On to Freya. Midgardian Male.
She's basic attack pretty heavily. It's better for her than for like Baka though, because she is magical. So although you're investing in the Midgardian male, you still don't have protections for the damage. However, Midgardian male, still a super strong item, still has not gotten nerfed. I don't know why. We shall see though. Next up is Ganesh. Ganesh. See, there's a reason I would put him here. There's a reason for this. Should I do it? Yes or no? We'll put him up here, see what happens. See how mad people get. Ganesh is S tier for one reason and one reason alone. He is the hardest counter to Terra as of right now. Terra is the best god in the game right now. I don't know how much there is to debate that. In my opinion, that's just straight up facts. Like, I don't think it's really hard to debate that Terra is the best god in the game right now. She can play all 5 roles quite well. Solo and support in particular. She can also be played in the jungle and mid lane. ADC a little bit, you know, out there, but she does have the basic attack based passive. The Ganesh with the silence, the Ohm, is the biggest counter to Terra's kit, because the dash monolith, you can just Ohm it out, make sure that your team doesn't get rooted. The clap, the earth clap, you can Ohm it out, make sure she can't cast it again to clap. Most of her, the reason that Ganesh is so good in my opinion is that most of Terra's kit is very like multi-stage. Like if you want to get the CC, you have to use multiple instances of the same ability or multiple abilities in order to get it. Ganesh really does well into like channeling-esque characters because of his silence. He's also just decent into any other matchup. He doesn't really have a poor matchup besides certain high CC gods like Ares, Cerberus, such and such. But besides those, I think purely because he counters Terra, similar to like gods like Fenrir who countered Rat in the past, he's gonna be really high tier because of it. Is he as good as Terra? No, but he is the hardest counter to that character. And I think that alone puts him in S tier. I mean, there's also that ultimate damage, the ultimate setup, the 1 early game clear, the setup with his 3, the 2, you know. He's got aspects to be in like at least A+, but just being able to counter Terra is the reason he's an S. Next is Geb. Geb is a character, he lacks the early game aggression that some supports like. I like Geb. I think you don't need early game aggression to be the best support. I like peel based supports. A little bit interesting though, because Geb, in order to initiate, requires the blink, and supports need to get that upgraded sprint level 1, so if they get the blink second, they're not going to have a shell, which means either your solo laner gets it or someone else gets it. It's really risky for your solo laner to get it, because that means there's no thorns in order to soak up hunter damage, which is crit based now more than ever, so that's going to be problematic. I think that, however, Geb in particular does well into the crit based meta, so you know, there's that. His shield is always going to be a talking point. I think the biggest lackluster is the fact that he does rely on blink to initiate, and because of that, I'll only put him in A+. Next up is Guan Yu. Pretty bad. Like, why would you ever play the god? You could play him in jungle, maybe. I don't know. He's just bad. He lacks everything. The only thing he has is a good ultimate. So, the rest of his kit is lackluster. Next up is Hachiman. I'd say the best hunter in the game right now. High early game aggression, high late game damage. Very safe god. It's extremely hard to lock down a Hachiman because of his mounted archery in particular. His lane pressure with his 2 isn't even that bad, so you always have to worry about that. His ranged basics on his 1 make him really hard to box because he can just stay at a distance where you can't get him, but he can get you. All around, I think he is the best hunter in the game right now. He can build into the crit, and ranged crits is pretty stupid, so yeah, S tier god. Next is Hades. Hades actually did get buffed this patch, and I think that there's an opportunity for him to be in the jungle. Devour Souls
Now only on 11-second cooldown. That's a pretty short cooldown for ability that also heals and does a good amount of damage. Hades' biggest flaw will always be the fact that he stands still in his ultimate, similar to Anubis, except his does a lot less damage, but it does have a lot wider area. So that requires Hades to do one of two things, either be 5 levels ahead so the ult does a lot of damage and they just focus on running away, or B, being tanky enough to survive any sort of burst that comes upon him when he drops the ultimate. I think that being in any higher tier would be wrong, even though he does have potential as a jungler. I still think that ultimate, being able to not move, or not that, I word that incorrectly, not being able to move is going to hurt him a lot, especially because of the amount of bursts we have in this meta currently. Okay. Hou Yi, one of the most prioritized ranked gods, and one of the better gods right now as a mage. He's been played a lot in jungle, he's been played a lot in mid, he can be played in either of those roles. There are specific counterpicks for this character, but he is strong. He is one of the stronger mages in the game currently. His poke is good with his 3-1, specifically his 3 as poke. His 1 is a lot of damage, especially close up, and makes him hard to approach because of how much damage it does. It also has a really short cooldown. His ultimate, you know, it's a pretty big mage ultimate. I think his carpet also should be in the conversation when it comes to rating this character. Really stupid ability. Basically grant slow immunity as well as movement speed. Sprint. That's just what it is. It's sprint. Upgraded sprint. Not upgraded sprint. It's sprint. And I think that just every ability in Hebo's kit, Hou Yi's kit, is just super strong, and really nothing. The only weakness he has is a lack of like hard mobility, and if you use the ult to get in, you better be getting that kill, otherwise you're not getting out. Next is Hell. Anti-heal is the name of the game, and you can tell by most of the healer gods being pretty low tier. Hell is no different in my opinion. Really easy to lock down, really easy to just shut down. Divine Ruin, Pestilence, even Brawlers, even Toxic Blade, that got buffed this patch. You know, just slap everything on. Hell's not healing for anything. Sobek, you know, plenty of options right now. I don't think Hell's that good right now, especially because she lacks any hard mobility. Next is Hercules. I think Hercules is good right now. Pressure is the main thing he provides, along with being pretty bulky, you know. He lifts. He's got that mitigate wounds, which really just stops any damage in his tracks. I think that because of that in particular, he's going to be considered a relatively good solo laner. He also has a lot of CC and displacement in his 2-1 combo that really allows you to pick off certain players and put him in unfavorable positions, similar to a Sobek. I think Sobek is better than him right now, spoiler alert, but he is pretty strong, and he does fulfill the role as a solo laner quite nicely. Next is Hou Yi. Hou Yi is a pretty good hunter right now. He fits the late game hunter while also being ability based, so he does have a good amount of early game. He does lack a basic attack stim. Think he makes up for that with his massive teamfight ultimate. Similar to Cupid's, however, his doesn't require you to stay in it to do damage. It does damage the moment it's dropped. It also looks a lot scarier than Cupid's ult, and also slows. It slows as much as Cupid's ult. Doesn't have a cripple, but you can stun in it with your 1. You also have the knock up from his 3. So like he's got more confirmable CC to make sure they're locked inside of it, whereas Cupid's stun heart bomb is comboed after you slow them and only comes after the mez. So, you know, some things there to take into consideration, and that's also why I just prefer Hou Yi over Cupid, because Hou Yi's late game is not even that bad. Next is Hun Batz. Hun Batz has that big old Fear No Evil. Rest of his kit is always, like I say, pretty mediocre. Like, it has the damage, has the assassin, cool, big old cone. That Fear No Evil is what swings team fights in a Hun Batz's, or if he misses it, the other team's favor. That's one of the most team fight oriented ultimates in the game, and it's on an assassin too, so a relatively mobile
class, being able to have one of the most impactful ults in the game really allows you to do things. Another thing to take into consideration is that it's a fear. So that means that if you were to, say, drop it on a team fight, right, you're spreading people out, meaning you're splitting the opposition in a way that hopefully is advantageous for your team, because the squishies are going one direction, the tanks are probably going another, meaning you're splitting up the tanks and squishies, allowing you to burst down one or the other, usually the squishies. Because of that, I think he is an A+ god. He might even rise up, because like I said with Fenrir, some of the high-tier assassins, the top-tier assassins, have been nerfed a bit, and that leaves the door open for some mid-tiers to climb up the ranks and become the new high-tiers. Next is Isis. I think Isis is underrated. Maybe not too much, but I think her counter-pick potential in particular, and if you're good at her, I think that you should play her. Her early game aggression is really hard to rival as a mage. Wing Gust really just clears wave and clears anything really, really well. Her stun ball, absurd amounts of damage as well as a stun. That's why, hence stun ball. Her 3, a little bit underrated actually. Really good for peeling off assassins because it slows and silences while also reducing their protections, making them more vulnerable to a counterattack. All these just add up. And I didn't even mention the ultimate, one of the best objective securing ultimates in the game. And also one of the best sieging ultimates in the game, something that is really difficult to do right now. Sieging Phoenixes in particular. Isis makes that a little bit easier by dropping the circle of protections, giving, protections, and as well as damage and healing when detonating. So I think she's pretty good in the siege area. Next up is Izanami. She's got clear, nothing else. So I don't know. I don't really see a reason to pick her specifically over Kronos. Sure, she has clear over him, but the ultimate, Kronos is so much better. If you're just looking at ults, Kronos is better. But I guess that's not what you're looking at in a hunter. You're looking at crits, which she doesn't benefit as much as other hunters because she's got the 75 going out, and if she doesn't hit the backswing, she doesn't hit the full 100%. So the crits only boosting the 75% and the 25%. So really she also, each aspect of the crit is getting reduced. So, there's that. But her 1, I think, is what saves her from any sort of low tier, because that just allows her to shred whatever she's chucking her, what's they called, sickles at. Next is Giannis. He took a bit of a hit this patch. Did he fall that much? No. You don't pick Giannis just for his unstable vortex. You pick him for the mobility. Silly high res. His 1 and 4, the 2 mobility abilities, didn't get touched at all, I don't think. So he still got that under his belt. His threshold duration actually does hurt him a bit. I don't think she's going to be low tier by any stretch of the imagination. It did hurt him a bit because he's not able to zone out full areas of the map by just dropping the threshold, allowing your team to really steamroll in. And it also just completely halts any opponent movement, right? Ultimate, still, Giannis ultimate. The cooldown, I think, and the scaling and cooldown nerfs on his 2. The cooldown nerf, I think, affects his DPS a lot. Scaling, I don't think it affected it too much. But besides that, I think he's still a really strong character. Not just because, his damage that he provides is a little bit less, but the utility he provides is still there, and that's still very much a strong reason to pick him. Next is Jing Wei. I think Jing Wei is strong. Like, one of the stronger hunters right now. Very safe. Not as safe as Hachiman for sure. But she does path into that crit build quite nicely. Just like, because, she's got crit in her too. Being able to path into that crit build as a hunter right now is not even that bad. Because she farms up really well early game. Late game she comes in. And she just starts sweeping people under the rug, I think that people have been for a while saying hunters are struggling, hunters are bad, hunters need a buff. Although that might still be true, I think that's a little less true, especially since the hunter meta might have just changed from what we were used to. Next is Kali. Sorry, Kali. It feels basic attack, man. Really just feels basic attack. Midgardian male, similar to Bakasura, really just feels bad. Really just hurts this character a lot. She still does have that potential late game to hyper carry. I don't think Midgardian buff affected her as much as affected Baka. Still affected her a lot though. Her early game, I think, is really lacking now that she didn't have Bluestone, which is why I put her only in A-. And yeah, I think that Kali, she might have a chance to come back in the meta at some point. I don't think now's the time though. I think that there's still some gods that outshine her in the jungle role. Next is Capri. I feel bad for you, man. I don't think you've been played once in SBL. Oh, what happened, man? I know what happened. Just better gods to be picked besides him. Like, his ultimate, it's nice on 110-second cooldown, though. Is it really worth it for the revive that is not even guaranteed? You know, I love this god. He's my favorite god in the game. Struggling a bit, especially because the amount of bursts that people just have and how easy it is to apply it onto Capri. Like, it's really hard to miss an Agni bomb on a Capri. Just Capri not being the tankiest guardian either. All in all, just like there's a lot of aspects of the meta that hurt him right now. I still think he has his merits, specifically in the ultimate and his peel. I think if you have a double frontline comp, he is really good because he's able to peel for the backline really well. One of the best, if not the best gods when it comes to peeling in the game. But it's unfortunate that he's seen quite a bit of a fall from his Season 2 glory, which I loved. I love you, Capri. You're a god, dude. Next is Cuckoo. Cuckoo for Book of Thoth. I don't know. I was making a joke there somewhere. Cuckoo is a god. I'd put him like here. Like in between A and A-. I think I'll put him in A-. I don't know. He's a god. He has the damage. He has the zoning potential. He just doesn't have the safety that other gods have. The only hard CC he has is in his ultimate. Relatively bad if your only hard CC as a low mobility mage is in your ultimate. At least you have hard CC. A new Apwash is really crying there. But I think that in certain team comps he works really well. Like if you have the comp specifically built for the Cuckoo, like maybe a Kumba to peel really hard, Capri to peel really hard. If you have heavy peel based gods, I think he works pretty well. The issue is many junglers are very dive heavy. And because of that, it's really hard for a Cuckoo to flourish in the meta right now. Also, Book of Thoth isn't as good as Warlocks. Just, like, that's facts, bro. Like, I don't know how you can argue that Book of Thoth is better. In my opinion, there's just no reason that Warlocks isn't better. Maybe, I guess, power, but even still, the amount of damage you're bringing because you're alive longer is pretty powerful. But I think that Cuckoo is decent in the certain comps, but since many junglers are really dive heavy right now, really hard for him to get anything going. Next is Kumakarn. He's seen quite a bit of a rise. Not gonna lie. I think that's because teams are finally realizing that a 3-second mez is pretty good when it comes to peel, and a 2-second root is pretty good when it comes to setup. That's really all it comes down to. The setup and the peel that Kumba provides is absurd. Not to mention his ult's only on 75-second cooldown instead of a full 90 seconds, meaning that he's able to knock someone up really high in the air for 2.2 seconds every 75 seconds. What's not to like about this character? Besides maybe his lane clear and his passive, but besides those two aspects, I think he's pretty strong right now. He might even be A+. I think he's A for now. We'll have to see where the future takes him. Kuzenbo, not A+. Might be A. Right now, A-. I do feel like Kuzenbo is going to see a rise. Like I said, the hunters are building crit. Kuzenbo loves when that happens because he presses 2 and reflects it all back with Shell Spike. But as of right now, I don't see a reason to pick him like in any role. Where are you going to pick him solo? Sobek, Cerberus. 2 guardians in solo lane that are better. Where are you going to pick him support? Anyone else in support, please. He doesn't work that well in support. In solo, I think it works better because he can build more selfish, but Curb and Sobek are right there. So I think that because of that, Kuzenbo is in the A-. He does have certain aspects of his kit that are better than others, but
it's just really hard to synergize with a team because you're pushing people all every which way, and it's just kind of hard to lock someone down. You're more of a peel focused god, but Sobek does that way better. Next up is Loki. He's D tier because Loki. I don't like the god. He's ugly. Ugly gods go to ugly tiers. But real talk, Loki's probably would be like here. As much as it pains me to say it, split push is not even that bad right now. You can split push towers and force people to back. In ranked, he's good because ranked people aren't coordinated. Once you get to like actual levels of play, coordination is key, and Loki gets poo-pooed on when there's a coordinated team because coordinated teams are like, hey, Loki's diving me. Can we collapse? Everyone's like, alright, and the Loki's dead. So Loki is basically the equivalent of a suicide bomb that's not guaranteed to get the bomb off. Next up is Medusa. She's Medusa. Pretty average hunter, I'd say. Pretty basic hunter as well. She's got the stun in the ultimate if people are looking at her. I think with Cerberus she might be kind of tantalizing though. I don't know if they fixed this or not, but if you're knocked up in Kerbal, no matter where you're facing, you get stunned. Not sure if an intended feature or just whatever it is, but it's interesting nonetheless. Besides that, like synergy, it's Medusa. She's gonna box people. She's got this strafing penalty removed, so she can try to like juke out basics and stuff. I think she's interesting. Probably not gonna see like a lot of her. We'll see a bit of her though. She's fine. She's an average hunter. Mercury is interesting because he's in that place where he could be A+, and he might be A+, but I'm going to put him in A anyway because the lane or the pathways for his ultimate, we'll just say, are pretty different this season, and I don't think people have adjusted to the pathways yet because I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, you can ult from your dual lanes tier 1 to their dual lanes tier 1. And same in the solo lane. So the gank paths for a Mercury with ultimate is different than like in past seasons where the Mercury would have to be in the jungle and he'd have to like find a way to like angle it so that he would hit his target. That means that it's pretty hard to ward in between tier 1 and tier 2 towers early game. So he could probably catch people off guard with these ganks. I think that's his biggest like upside. Besides the fact that he is also really highly valuable late game, he will be like 3-shotting people with his basics, 2-shotting people with his basics. The thing about Mercury, I think that most people need to consider is that despite his late game being really good and his early game being considered weak, he still has a good amount of control in his ultimate and his 3 that allow him to be, may not be the star of the show early game, but still provide for his team early game. And that's why I think that he still provides early game. Next up is Najah. Very CC, very crit heavy god. The issue is that he's an all-in god, and if he's behind at all inning doesn't work as well because people just kind of live through your combo, and if they live through your combo, you're dead because you have no way of escaping. Unless you use your ult defensively, in which case, you're not an all-in character, you're just wasting your ult. I think that's Najah's biggest flaw. You have to be ahead in order to play her correctly. But if you're good at her, why not? Next is Neith. Neith is an ability-based hunter, pretty run-of-the-mill. She's got the global ultimate. I think that's the one thing that might be any argument for higher tier, but other than that, she's pretty much outclassed by Ullr in every other way. Safety, Ullr's got lifesteal built in. He's also got the 2 for movement speed and the leap. He's got a stun instead of a root, although it is only single target. But he's also got more damage in his 1 and 3. The only thing he lacks is an ultimate, but ability-based wise, I think that Ullr wins. Next is Nemesis. Is Nemesis the best jungler in the game? Or is it someone else? I think Nemesis is really strong right now. Upgraded sprint kind of rustles her jimmies a bit. Besides that, she's still strong. Her ultimate is really powerful. Gives a big old target sign to whoever she ults. She ults a squishy, they're dead. Tank, they're dead. Whoever she decides is the focus of the fight, she can ult and make her team focus. I I think getting protections of the opponent is also super useful. Makes her a little bit more resilient, allows her to last longer in fights. Plus the shield, giving her healing, and you know, a shield helps out in these fights, team fights as well. Her early game is pretty decent in her gank capabilities and damage. I think she does rely on that Heartseeker a bit to provide a little bit more burst, but besides that, she's pretty strong. Next is Nike. Average solo laner. She survives a lot of things, you know, with her ultimate shield. She also has a decent amount of safety with the leap and the knockup and the damage from her one. She's a safe god, relatively simple god, but she does what she's supposed to do, which is help her team out in the late game and team fights. Next is Nox. Interesting pick. Support picks. Nox. What was I saying? Nox has been picked in support a bit. She hasn't. I don't like this god too much. I think she's relatively underwhelming. If you want to get the burst damage out of her, you have to land the combo. If you don't land the combo, you're literally better off playing any other character in the game. The ultimate, I think, might be what brings her up from like any tier, low tier, to this tier. I think that's the reason I put her in A tier. I mean, because like damage reduction, 75-second cooldown, long range, good amount of damage, take damage, you know, a lot of good parts to the ultimate. I think this is one of the better ultimates for mages. I feel though as though the mage meta right now, more than ever, is really artillery or poke-esque gameplay, unless you have a lot of utility. Nox has some utility, but you have to land it, and if you don't, you know, you'd be better off playing like a Giannis, who can just portal people around, and you don't really need too much accuracy in order to hit the portal, because your team does it for you. All in all, I think the high skill ceiling for Nox really brings her down, because skill is also an aspect that you have to take into consideration. How hard is this character to execute at full caliber? If it's not too difficult, but it functions pretty well, why not pick that over Nox, you know? Next is Nuwa. Nuwa, overrated as hell, dude. I think this character just gets poo-pooed on by most mid laners right now. Really lacking early game, I think. Really makes her weak compared to other mages. I feel like the reliance on the clay soldiers and the stun and like really being a low pressure mid laner really gives up a lot. If the opponent is able to capitalize off of the fact that you're playing Nuwa, they're usually just going to steal your red, invade your jungle, make sure that you're going to stay behind and have to play passive, which allows them to steal more reds, and it's just a cycle that eventually leads to you losing because, you know, besides your ult and your one, you don't really have too many movement options outside of that. Next is Odin. I think that Odin is A+. Odin counters many of the mages because most of them don't have leaps. In fact, many of the higher tier mages don't have leaps. They have dashes. Thoth, Agni, Habois, Giannis. I mean, depending on how you place the cage and depending on where he is. But out of those, I mean, Discordia is the only one with a leap. So Odin has a pretty fun time caging. And even if they do have some leaps, you're still forcing those out, which can help you win a team fight later. Odin's ult isn't on too long of a cooldown, and I think in jungle in particular, his ability to not only control the map, but also just control the movement of the players on the map is super vital for a team. And his ult, although not having any sort of hard CC, Odin's ult allows him to set up for a lot of things, specifically big AoE mage ults like a Vulcan ult, like a Hou Yi. I mean, Hou Yi's not a mage, but like a Hou Yi ult, like an Agni ult, you know, those big ults that in a restricted area hit a lot more of the time than in like an open field. Next is Osiris. He's a pretty interesting character. Really fell off the face of the planet when Death Toll was removed, but I still believe that he has an impact, specifically as a counter pick in either the jungle or the solo lane, specifically because of that anti-healing. I guess I'd like him to be into a raw Low mobility, again, similar to Cabrakan, where he really just punishes low mobility characters hard, as long as they don't have slow immunity. He punishes them. So I think that's Osiris's main role as a character right now. So I like him in that role. I like him as a counter pick to low mobility drafts. Next is Scylla. She's actually been seeing quite a bit more than I expected, like just love. A lot of easy to confirm burst on her too. The one is a root that also does a lot of damage. Her ultimate, quote F dot, can literally change something like that. Change your team fight, put the team fight in your favor, whatever it is. But Scylla is strong, especially with how much setup you're getting out of the soul laners, because them being guardians more often than not. You can pretty easily hit 2 to 3 man Scylla ults now pretty consistently. Even if you don't, you got your crush, which does about as much damage, you know. Pretty on a 10-second cooldown too, so you got a lot of damage there. The only thing she's lacking is an early game, but with how quickly mages get farmed, it's not too big of a deal, because unlike a Nuwa or like gods like that, she didn't have to play passive. She can play somewhat aggressive by throwing the crush out, maybe getting some poke damage through that. Next is Poseidon. Wolfie's Poseidon is good. Little tuning necessary, but I think it's good. Ranked players Poseidon is alright, depending on how well they build it. He's an A tier god for sure, because he does lack that sort of dash leap that I'd like to see from a jungler heavy meta. But he does have the whirlpool for self peel. If he builds Gem of Isolation on top of that, you really can't move in that. It's really hard to move, just in general. Kraken, really impactful ultimate. Stun, knock up, you know, damage, slows before the cast, you know, a lot of things attached to that ability. It's a pretty good ability, you know. I think that if you execute him correctly, Poseidon is really strong. If you execute him poorly, he's alright. He's really good as a counter pick into high mobility gods, though, because of his whirlpool. Next is Ra. Poseidon, another one of Wolfie's picks. Wolfie's dope, by the way. Shout out to my man. Ra. Ra is a god that has a snipe. Very artillery-esque. One of the few healer gods that is breaking out of the A- tier. I'd say that that's because he doesn't rely on his heal as an identity, but rather as an addition to his utility. His identity is really the OG artillery mage, with his beam and his ultimate being able to just snipe people out. Plus the amount of setup you're getting from your soul laner. Like I said with Scylla, it's pretty easy to confirm these big old Ra snipes. Plus it's on such a short cooldown that even if you miss it, you'll have one up within the team fight anyway. I think that Ra really does provide a lot for teams, especially when it comes to sieging. I think that healer gods have their place as siege and anti-siege gods, respectively, depending on if you're winning or losing. Anti-heal, however, does affect their performance a bit. I think that Ra, though, has enough of an identity outside of healing that it doesn't affect him as much. Next up is Regin. He fell from the best mage of Season 4 to... He's alright. He's got the taiko drums to provide CC, provide control of a fight, in a team fight. His early game is pretty decent because of his 1. His Raiju, +1, does a good amount of damage. He's got a good leap, you know. He's got everything an average mage needs. Nothing too spectacular. Next is Rom. You know, this is a character you look at. His kit, nothing too spectacular, but he's been... I think Rom's pretty good right now. Especially because people are drafting the later game-esque gods. Rom really does fit into that late game hunter build quite nicely, being that he only has basic attack affecting abilities and his ultimate. Really 3 augments to his basic attack and a long range basic attack that does ability damage. This allows Rom to build into Devo's crit, lifesteal, you know, stuff like that. And it also allows him to just, you know, hurt the opposition quite hard, as well as make sure that objectives such as FG and Gold Fury are bursted down. I think that while we're on Rom, I think he's the last hunter. No, Uller and Xiblanca are next. But besides those two, I think Rom's a good point to point out why basic attack-based hunters have been seeing a resurgence. I think that is partially due to the Crusher nerf that has recently been implemented into the game. Crusher, I think, costs 50 more gold and does a little bit less damage, meaning that it's a little less effective, meaning gods that don't need it, or gods that can flourish without it, the basic attack-based ones, have had a better time than they did before when they couldn't build Crusher and proc it as frequently because that struggled a bit more. Next up is Ratatoskr. I think he's a pretty solid jungler right now. He has the dive potential from cross map because he's got that semi-global ultimate. His damage is absurd on a single target. On a team fight, he's really looking more for the setup where he ults in, knocks up a couple players, and his mage drops his or her ult onto that team fight and wins it from there. I think Rat early game is very kill focused and late game very setup focused. So I like assassins that do that. Yeah, I think that's about it when it comes to Rat. I'll put him in A+. Robin similarly going to the A+ tier. I think that Robin being one of the few warrior jungles that really just packs a punch, get it? Because he's got like 10 hand Shadow Fist or whatever. Yeah, but Robin's early game, whoa Nelly, that's some jelly, am I right? His ability to just delete targets early game is absurd. Specifically mages, I think that's what Robin likes to pick off right now. Just say it's a new wall, he just ults in, presses 1, basic, presses 3, basic, presses 2 if he really wants to feel spicy, and they're dead at that point. That's a lot of burst to deal with early game, and he's really able to... Robin's one of those few characters that's really able to extend a lead quite nicely, specifically because of that ultimate and, you know, damage immunity, damage reduction on his kit, and him being a warrior and all that allows him to just accentuate a lead further and further until he becomes an unstoppable force. Next is Serket. I'd say the best jungler in the game right now. I don't know how much competition she has currently. I don't think she has too much. Her CC is absurd. Her damage is absurd. She's got true damage. You know, kind of cool, right? Another thing she has is a lot of, surprisingly, I know, right? Surprisingly, she has got a lot of mobility. Having 2 mobility abilities allows her to maneuver around the map quite easily. Her gank potential with the Cobra's Kiss as well as the Death's Bane, really strong. Her ability to just control a team fight with Cobra's Kiss in particular is what I would like to mention. That madness effect, quite potent when it comes to team fighting. Although it does not hit all 5 members of an opponent, it does affect a couple, and those couple, depending on the target selection of the Serket, can be super impactful. Next is Scotty. Scotty is an ability-based hunter I forgot even existed. I always forget about this god. Which shows about how good she is. A tier. Maybe even A-. I'll put her in A tier to be generous. She has some potential. Dog, Calder, you know, kind of gets hurt by getting hit. But Hunter's being played in the mid. She does have a chance. Lack of mobility, though, and lack of CC immunity might hurt her chances quite a bit. Next is Sobek. Sobek R. One of the better guardians in the game right now. Can be played in both solo and support very effectively. Specifically in solo lane, where he's been rising a lot. Despite, you know, being a crocodile that likes to lurk in the waters. His ability to just peel for allies, set up for allies, heal himself, make sure he himself stays alive, as well as provide a lot of damage and CC in a team fight is just absurd, man. He provides basically everything that you want from a solo laner, plus a little bit more, right? Sobek's playstyle is very, very synergistic in the current meta, where you kind of want to like poke out opponents and then start quick engage. I think that's actually the right word. I'm brain dead. Whoa. You just want to start a quick engagement and end the fight quickly and make sure your carries stay alive for the objectives afterwards. And the siege. Sieging is really interesting with Sobek. I think Sobek is really good counter-sieging in particular because you can pluck him under the Phoenix and hope your team bursts them down. Similarly enough, you can pluck them out of the safety of the Phoenix and make sure your team bursts them down. You know, he's really just all around one of the most felt presences in the game currently. Because of that, I might even put him in S tier. Yeah, I'll put him in S tier. Soul fell a bit with her nerfs. I don't know how far she fell. We'll say A+. The nerfs hurt her quite a bit. I think the last tier list, she was one of the best hunters in the game. Right now, she's, you know, not the best. She's like an a little bit better than the other portion of hunters. She still has that late game, especially when it comes to taking towers. No contest there. One of the best tower takers in the game. Pretty safe god. Has the damage, has the burst. You know, she's a mage, so she will have the burst. Her early game being nerfed means that she isn't like the best of the best anymore, so there's that. Sun Wukong. He exists. He does. Wukong clears wave, then does some rotation maybe, then hits a person or two. It's Wukong, man. Like, he's kind of basic, kind of average. Somersault Cloud might be an ability that allows him to counter certain gods, but, you know, what is Wukong really? Besides average. Next is Susanoo. Since some of these high tier assassins have been getting nerfed a bit, Susanoo I think we'll see a rise, as his ultimate's really good in team fights. Big knock-up and damage coming from what is it even called? Summer Storm or something? No, it's called Typhoon, isn't it? Yeah, big damage coming out of Typhoon, as well as his ability to control people with his 2 early game is quite nice. That pull really allows him to get a lot of damage off, and his ability to just do a decent amount of damage with his Storm Kata as well as Jetstream is also there. So I'd say he's a pretty decent assassin. Maybe a little lacking compared to some of the top 3 mainly because of his passive. So once he gets a good passive, he'll start rising a lot. I think that Sylvanas is A tier. The lane clear and aggression he has in lane is really nice. Supports like Sylvanas, however, really rely on an upgraded sprint to stay alive, and that might not even be enough with how much lockdown people are going to have currently. Sylvanas is very interesting where he works in certain situations, but in other situations the jungler just ganks and shuts him down early, in which case he gets shut down even harder and harder and harder until he just doesn't do anything. That's why Sylvanas is only A tier, but he still does provide the wisps for healing and the 3 and 1 for support effects such as CC. Next is Terra, the best god in the game. High res. Please fix this god. She's got a root the size of the lane. 1.5 second stun. Pretty easy to confirm. 2 dashes if she wants. And one of the best ultimates for Guardians in the game. 10% damage increase, 10% damage decrease, heal over time, as well as a burst heal, as well as damage. If it sounds bloated, because it is bloated, and I just have no understanding of why Hi-Res hasn't nerfed her in patch 5.7. At least you can do is make it so that the Terra monolith dies quicker. That's the least you can do, Hi-Res. But you also really need to tone down some of those numbers. I hope that comes through. Until that point, Terra is the best god in the game. There is no question in my mind when I say Terra is the best god in the game. She's a flex pick. She has damage. She has sustain. She has utility. She has it all as a guardian, and I really just don't understand why. Next is Thanatos. Thanatos is one of those gods that really needs to get rolling in order to do something. And if he doesn't get rolling, he's kind of there as an execute bot, nothing else. He's got the scythe that does a lot of damage. He's got the silence that does a good amount of crowd control. And he's got the ultimate that stuns, but it also is his only form of escape. So use it wisely. Besides that, I think Thanatos is decent. You know, you can play him if you want. Next is the Morrigan. Via the Morrigan. I actually don't know how I feel about this character. She's like pretty good. I think she's
I haven't seen a lot of this character. I'll put her in A. I feel like she's got an alright laning phase. Her team fight really, just like her kit revolves around that ultimate. And that's a little bit risky because if you don't have that ultimate up, what are you doing really with this character? Not as much as say like an Agni who has, not only does he have 3 ultimates, but he also has a lot of damage from his dash and his stun and all this absurdity, this absurdity and nonsense that characters like the Agni, the Giannis, the Thoth can put out. Morgan simply can't really do that to the same extent. She's more of an assassin-esque playstyle. Not sure how assassin-like mages are faring right now, in the mid lane in particular. Next is Thor. Thor is the classic slam dunkaroo assassin, and he's gonna be spinning all over you. I like Thor. He's got a lot of CC for the late game, sets up for his carries. He's got a lot of damage early game, a lot of damage. That allows him to get ahead and make sure his team gets to a point where they can start winning games. I think the biggest point of contention for Thor is the fact that his ultimate is global and allows him to gank from places that you usually wouldn't expect a person to gank from because your ward coverage isn't always on point. Thoth is the best mid laner in the game IMO. His long-range poke in team fights really makes it hard to deal with team fighting a god like that, because not only does he have long-range poke, meaning he's super safe, but he also has a long-range dash, which gives a stun at the end, making him even safer. I think the cooldown when he's holding the stun nerf has a large effect on him, though. I think that really hinders his safety a bit. We'll have to see how much it affects him. I feel as though it still won't affect him enough because he's got that long-range poke, as well as high safety, and just the artillery effects, as well as the burst damage from his ultimate is just really strong. I do know, however, that pro teams have found a way to deal with him, so we'll see. Next is Tyr. He's aight. He tears, he dashes at you, shink, and then, does damage from there. Pretty average god, in my opinion. Next is Ullr. Ullr got nerfed recently. Still think he's really strong, specifically in the double hunter comps where people like running Ullr mid, and I don't blame him. He does a lot of damage. His scaling is getting nerfed a bit, does hurt him a little bit, as well as the Crusher nerf hurting him a bit more because he has a stance switcher that can proc it quite frequently. I think the scaling nerfs on the 3 especially are going to hurt him a bit, but besides that, he still has a lot of burst. And it all comes after one single stun, so I think he'll be fine. I think he'll be fine in mid, and I think he'll be fine in ADC. Next is Vaughn. I haven't actually seen a lot of Vaughn. I think I want to see a little bit more of this character. I think he's dope. Specifically as a counterpick to immobile mages. Like I said, there are a couple warriors, Osiris, Vaughn, and guardians like Cabrakan that counter low mobility gods so well, and we just don't see a lot of them. I think that Vaughman's one of those gods that if you play him in jungle like Homifei did, and you build Hasten Katana every game, I don't know what you're doing, because it's specifically to counter certain types of characters. I think that whether you're playing him in the solo lane or the jungle, or even the support or whatever, ADC, Cyclone Spin, whatever you're doing, just got to keep in mind why you're doing it, and Vaughn is always about shutting down those low mobility targets. Because of that, I feel like he's an A-tier god because he's very counterpick focused compared to some of the other gods in this tier list. He really has to be played into a low mobility god in order to be fully successful. Otherwise, he won't really be as successful as you'd want. Next is Vulcan. Vulcan's got a lot of burst and a decent amount of maneuverability with his one. I think where he lacks, though, is the early game for sure. His pressure really doesn't come up until he gets a couple levels in his 1 or his 3 or his 2. Wherever he puts his points in, he needs a couple levels before he starts making an impact anywhere. Xbalanque, I think, is actually A+. Now, hear me out. Late game, Xbalanque is one of the best hunters in the game. His ultimate is really annoying to deal with just in a fight. His ultimate also increases his basic attack range, allowing him to fight from a distance, making him pretty safe. He's also got CC immunity on his dash, allowing him to further increase the distance between you and him. I think that because of those reasons, Xiblanc is pretty strong. Again, people are going to point to that laning phase. I agree with that. I don't think it's all that great. But then again, most of these late game hunters don't have that great of a laning phase. Xing Tian. Xing Tian, he's a solo laner, gets outclassed heavily by Cerberus in particular. I think because of that alone, he can't really be played to the fullest extent. However, I still do believe that Xing Tian has a place in the meta, has his niche, specifically because of his 1 and how it reduces basic attack base damage. So in double hunter comps, you might see something like a Xing Tian support Chalk solo, and that might counter your plans quite heavily because, you know, you're doing half damage. I think it was 50% at max rank with that 1, so always got to be careful, man. Next is Ymir. Similar to Sylvanas in the sense that he can get caught out really easily, but that 2.25 second freeze really making an impact when it comes to team fights and just fights in general, being able to knock or being able to lock down an opponent that long is really beneficial. It allows your mage to do a lot of nasty things to the opponent, and because of that, I think Ymir is A tier. Lacking in mobility and being able to get picked off easily in dual lane if a jungler ganks is really his downfall. I feel also being rooted when casting most of his abilities, 3/4 of his abilities, hurts him a bit too, just hindering his mobility even further. Besides those key weaknesses, I think he's an A tier god at the end of it. Zeus! Oh, I think Zeus is bad, dude. Zeus is pretty bad. He's got the burst, right? But he's also got no mobility. And plenty of gods have burst right now. I don't think Zeus is special with this burst. Scylla, Agni, Thoth, Habois, Giannis. They all have burst. Nothing special about Zeus, in my opinion. So he really requires a snowball, which is why I put him in the A-. Like, heavily, like, really heavily requires a snowball. Otherwise, even if you're like a level or 2 ahead, there's still a chance the jungler can kill you. You have to be a good 3 levels ahead with a couple items over your opposition before you start being sort of an unkillable menace and you're able to just drop your kit multiple times and get the kills you want. Finally, we get Zhong Kui. Oh, the lords have finished this tier list. I feel like it gets longer every time. But Zhong Kui, my man, I think he's still underrated. 40 protections from each type in his passive, plus his healing, plus his just damage from his ultimate 1, 2, 3. You know, all these factors, in my opinion, allow for Zhong to be a good character. I guess one thing he's lacking is that mobility, but the tankiness that he provides as well as the hard self-peel with the ultimate and the stun and the slows, you know, just like everything there, in my opinion, allows him to peel for himself quite nicely. I think he could be played in the solo. We'll have to see, though. But that right there is the tier list. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Tell me if you agree or disagree in the comments down below. I'm always down to have a conversation. It's always one of the best parts about making these, having a conversation and allowing me to see multiple perspectives on things I didn't think about. Like, for example, you might think Opwash is the best god in the game because there's a secret tech that I don't know about where his one-shots people. You know, it's always fun to have a conversation, and I think tier lists allow me to have a conversation with the SMITE community, and you guys can have a conversation with me. But yeah, I think that's right. That's the tier list. Get a good glimpse, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.